Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio Inch. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Fiio FX15. And you know what? It occurred to me that this will actually be the first Fiio IEM that I will have reviewed on this channel. That's not to say I'm unfamiliar with their IEMs, because I have had several over the years, like the FH3, FH5, and the FH7, but that was a while back. And while they were a little quirky and they didn't quite fit my tuning preference, I felt they still had some redeeming attributes and I could appreciate them for what they were at the time. But for one reason or another, I just decided not to review them. But when these showed up and I took my first listen, I immediately knew this was something special and I needed to share my thoughts on it, which I will do. But first, let's quickly go over what's included in the box with the FX15. Of course, we have the IEMs and cable, and since the cable is modular, it comes with both a 3.5 and a 4.4 interchangeable termination. It also comes with a very nice case. This is the HB5 case, and it looks nice, but it also has a small removable Velcro separator for the earpieces in case you want to keep the earpieces separated from everything else inside the case. Fiio also supplies an excellent assortment of tips, including some spin fit tips, and they also give you this case right here that kind of helps you organize your tips as well. Now, as far as the cable, this is an MMCX cable, and we all know that can be kind of a pain separating this connector from the shell. So what they do is they supplied you with this tool right here that helps you disconnect that. Then they also give you a cleaning tool and then a magnetic cable clip. As for the price, specifications, and design, the FX15 comes in at $799 and has a tribrid driver configuration consisting of 4 electrostatic drivers, 1 balanced armature driver, and then a dynamic driver. The housings are made from a high-grade 3D printed resin. They're a little on the thicker side, but they're still not what I would consider to be large, maybe more of a medium size. They're light, they have a well thought out shapes. They fit my ears almost perfectly. I had no problem achieving a superb fit and had no issues with discomfort, especially with the included spin fit tips. Again, the overall build quality is excellent of both the IEMs and cable. The faceplate design is simple, but it is beautiful and it goes well with the tinted semi-clear body. There is a single tuning switch located on the back of each shell, which I will talk about in more depth during the actual sound portion of the review. But as far as the cable color goes really well with the IEMs, and the cable build quality is excellent, and it's about what I would expect and hope to see at this price. Again, it's modular, so you can switch between a 3.5 single-ended termination or a 4.4 balanced termination. Now, if I had one nitpick, it would be that it's an MMCX cable. I would have preferred to see a 2-pin cable personally. As for the HB5 case, this is very nice. I love the blue and tan color combination. It should offer adequate protection. It's a hard case, but it's soft to the touch. It's not too large, but it is big enough to accommodate the IEMs. And again, while I personally haven't used it, they do offer a removable separator for the IEMs. So the FX15 package as a whole is very high quality and it just feels very complete. The presentation feels and looks like what you would expect at this price range. So we have a very beautiful presentation, excellent design and build, and all of the accessories that you could ever want at this price point. Okay, let's move on to the sound. Okay, let's talk about the sound of the FX15. Now, before we move forward, I do need to tell you that I did most of my testing with a tuning switch on because from what I could tell, it simply disables the electrostatic drivers and all but removes the treble from the sound signature. And for me personally, it just didn't sound great at all. So I didn't really spend that much time in that tuning mode. So nearly all of my testing was done with the switch on. But in regards to its overall sound, now, As I had mentioned before, I've owned several Fiio IMs in the past, and for the most part, I thought they were okay. They did have some quirky attributes in relation to their tuning, but if you've watched my reviews, you'll know that while I do have a tuning preference, I'm also pretty open to different tuning approaches, and my collection is fairly diverse. But based on my experience with Fiio IMs over the years, my expectation was that the FX15's tuning could and was maybe even likely to take somewhat of a different approach than what I might typically see from other companies. So you can imagine my surprise on a first listen when I started cycling through my usual test tracks and everything sounded, well, generally correct, and not just correct, but natural, refined, and detailed. And to be perfectly honest, I was quite stunned at the FX15's overall quality and tonal balance. And then I started doing some comparisons with the SA6 MK2, the SA6 Ultra, i600, the BGVP DM9, Dunuzin Pro, and even my Monarch MK2. And once again, I was quite impressed with the general presentation of the FX15. So what I'll do is I'll talk about its overall signature, then I will break things down in a little more detail as I usually do. The overall sound signature of the FX15 is what I would consider to be V-shaped. So an emphasis on bass, recessed mids, and then an emphasis on treble. And those recessed mids are fairly noticeable in the way it presents vocals and even some instruments. But if we break it down a little further, starting with the bass, what you'll see is the bass rise starting around 200 or 300 hertz and then steadily rising all the way into the sub bass. So you get really good sub bass extension, which means you also get plenty of that sub bass rumble. And while I wouldn't necessarily say it's a lot of bass, it does have a pretty meaty presentation, and some of that is attributable to the mid bass and low mid presence, which does add some warmth and richness to male vocals and some instruments that land there as well. And that also gives those instruments a little bit of extra note weight as well. Now, of course, typically with a V-shaped tuning, there's always the risk of bass bleed. However, this is one of those rare instances where we have a V-shaped tuning, but they still manage to maintain a very clean transition from the bass into the mids without muddying up the sound at all. So the overall bass presentation is quite clean and controlled. And then as you move into the mid-range, again, you have some of that extra low mid presence that adds just a nice amount of warmth and richness to vocals. And again, it also gives some of those instruments that land there just the right amount of note weight, but also maintains really nice amounts of low end and mid-range detail. However, because of the recess between 1 and 1.5K, it does affect vocal presentation just a little bit. And some vocals can sound not necessarily unnatural, but you can kind of tell some of those frequencies are recessed and pulled back a little bit. And then you have a relatively sudden and sharp rise starting around 1.5K and then peaking at around 2.5K. So you have this sudden shift in energy that does give you just a little bit of a mid-range bite. And beyond that point, you do have a fairly good amount of energy throughout the presence region and then a small dip around 6K, but then the energy comes right back after that and then continues throughout the upper treble. But the treble presentation is still quite controlled, and although there is good energy to snare and tom attacks and also good energy to cymbal strikes, again, it's very controlled. So it never gets to the point of sounding harsh, peaky, or sibilant. As a matter of fact, somehow it still manages to have even somewhat of a smoother presentation, but still, again, it maintains a lot of treble detail. And again, somehow they've found that balance between having good energy, but still having a really nice, smooth, and controlled treble presentation. Now, as far as treble detail, it's excellent. And with that really good amount of upper treble presence that you have past 10K, it also brings a lot of the micro details out as well. And of course, that upper treble presence gives you just the right amount of air and sparkle. As for technical performance, I would say its detail and micro detail retrieval is very, very good, which is what I would expect at this price. The soundstage is about as wide as I've heard with any IEM, so its presentation is nice and open, not just in terms of width, but with its forward depth as well. So instrument imaging and separation, the layering, it's also really, really good. Instruments have good focus and they're easy to place within the sound field, so it has excellent technical performance. It's up there with some of the best under $1,000 in my opinion. Speaking of which, where do I feel the FX15 sits in terms of competition? Well, I have several of my favorite IEMs under $1,000 out on the table. I've got the SA6 Ultra, SA6 MK2, IE600. I also have a few others like the Zen Pro. I did get the DM9 out. Now, the Zen Pro and the DM9, while those do have certain unique characteristics that I like, I don't feel like they really compete with these others in terms of pure sonic performance, and I'm at risk of going long, so I do have to try and get the comparisons done pretty quickly, but I will try to cover the main portions. So let's start with the IE600. Of course, the IE600 also has a V-shaped signature, but its bass tuning is quite different from the FX15's presentation, with it having more of a sub-bass focus tuning. It also has a much slower rise into the upper mids and also less upper mid presence in general. And the tuning of the upper mids and treble is more treble focused. So basically on the bottom end, you have a sub bass focus, and then on the top end, it focuses or highlights the treble over the mids, and its general presentation is more engaging and exciting than that of the FX15. And because of that additional treble energy, the IE600 can sound like it's maybe highlighting a little more of the details and micro details, whereas while the FX15 does have very good treble energy and definition, it seems like my attention was kind of pulled a little more towards its bass presentation because it's just so clean. And I would also say the presentation of the FX15 is generally more natural sounding. It's still exciting and engaging. However, the IE600 is definitely more exciting and engaging than the FX15. So these two have very different presentations, and I love them both. So it really depends on what type of presentation I'm in the mood for any given day at any given time. And the same goes for the SA6 Ultra and SA6 MK2. They just offer a different presentation, which again, these are still V-shaped as well, but these are more of a mild V-shape, so less of an emphasis on the bass and treble, and an overall slightly more relaxed presentation, at least when compared with the FX15 and IE600. Now, as for technical performance, all four of these are going to be pretty close in terms of detail. However, I do feel like the FX15 does have a slightly more open presentation and a wider soundstage than the IE600, SA6 MK2, and the Ultra. So I honestly don't know if I can say that one is technically better than the other, because they're all incredible in their own way, and each of them have their own unique attributes that I love. All four of these take a pretty different or unique approach to tuning. So you have basically several different flavors to choose from, some being more relaxed, some being more fun and engaging. And they're all very technically capable, but I guess the bottom line is that the FX15 is an outstanding IM, and it has now joined the ranks of some of the best IEMs under $1,000 in my opinion. And as for whether or not it gets my recommendation, absolutely. This is it's an outstanding IEM in my opinion. And like I said in my opening, I knew this was special as soon as I listened to them, and they've now become something I reach for regularly. So Fiio, well done. The Fiio FX15 is, again, it's an outstanding IEM. The package as a whole is outstanding. And again, this does get my recommendation. So that concludes my review of the Fiio FX15. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would, please like this video, please share this video. I hope you have an awesome day.